Hi, and welcome back. Today we will be discussing Theodore Adorno and Max Horkheimer's essay, The Culture Industry, Enlightenment as Mass Deception. Adorno and Horkheimer are two of the best-known representatives of the Frankfurt School, a group of very influential German-American theorists who helped develop critical theory, a form of social analysis influenced heavily by the work of Karl Marx. Critical theory takes a macroscopic perspective of society, viewing social problems as stemming from social structures and cultural assumptions, rather than individuals. Because of its historical opposition to capitalism and Western popular culture, critical theory today has become a political target. When people speak of cultural Marxism, for example, they are usually vaguely and pretty inaccurately referring to the Frankfurt School. Adorno and Horkheimer sought to highlight what they saw as vulnerabilities in the development of Western culture. Vulnerabilities which, if left unchecked, had the potential to lead to another crisis on the scale of World War II. In The Culture Industry, published in 1947 as part of Adorno and Horkheimer's book, Dialectic of Enlightenment, the authors offer a biting critique of popular culture, tearing into what they called the culture industry. The main slant of this text suggests that culture itself, like material goods, is produced and commodified in capitalist society. The Frankfurt School first originated from the Institute for Social Research at Goethe University in Frankfurt, Germany. The institute was originally established in 1923, with the initial funds provided by a man named Felix Weil, a wealthy young Marxist who sought to create a center for Marxist studies with an interdisciplinary perspective. The Frankfurt School's orientation towards critical theory truly began under the directorship of Max Horkheimer, who took over in 1930. Under Horkheimer, the institute sought to bring together social philosophers, economists, psychologists, and other scholars to provide a critique of society that they believed was more complete than classical Marxism. These theorists were critical of Marx's analysis for focusing too much on the economic base of society. They believed that the role of culture in determining social life could not be so easily reduced to the inherent tensions and contradictions of the capitalist economy. The global devastation of World War II played a major role in shaping the concerns of the Frankfurt School. The rise of Nazism in Germany and the unimaginable devastation left in the wake of the war left many people wondering how human society could devolve into such a state of crisis. With the rise of the Nazi regime in Germany, many members of the Frankfurt School, who were of Jewish origin or had Marxist affiliations, were forced to the United States in exile. During this time, they continued their work at Columbia University, where they turned their critical lens towards analyzing mass culture, authoritarianism, and the social dynamics of the capitalist societies in which they lived. Notable members of the Frankfurt School included Adorno, Walter Benjamin, Horkheimer, Marcuse, and Frederick Pollock, among others. Methodologically speaking, they were anti-positivists, but they were also psychoanalysts and existentialists. Much of the work on critical theory is humanistic in nature rather than purely scientific. After the war, Horkheimer and Adorno returned to Germany and re-established the Institute for Social Research. However, the intellectual legacy of the Frankfurt School continues to be very popular in American academia. The Culture Industry, Enlightenment as Mass Deception, offers a critique of the production of popular culture and its negative role in society, pointing out the ways in which capitalism and mass media have transformed culture into a commodity. One key aspect of this commodification of culture is its standardization. For Adorno, standardization refers to the process by which cultural goods are mass-produced in a basic, repetitive format. This implies that different pieces of culture, such as songs, films, or TV shows, follow the same basic template, leading to a lack of originality and creativity in art. As said by Adorno and Horkheimer, culture today is infecting everything with sameness. Film, radio, and magazines form a system. Each branch of culture is unanimous within itself, and all are unanimous together. Even the aesthetic manifestations of political opposites proclaim the same inflexible rhythm. Adorno and Horkheimer suggest that this phenomenon arises from the economic logic of capitalism, where the maximization of efficiency and profit often leads to standardized and fail-safe production methods. This process, they argue, has infiltrated cultural production, leading to a culture industry that produces standardized cultural goods in the same way that a factory might produce cars or electronics. One great example of this is the constant release of new superhero movies. The franchise model used by major film studios, like Marvel's Cinematic Universe or DC's Extended Universe, exemplifies standardization in practice. Each film is part of a larger, interconnected series. Each movie typically follows a fairly formulaic heroes versus villains plot, and they all contribute to the same overarching narrative. This encourages repetitive viewing habits, as audiences continue to watch new releases in the franchise, regardless of individual movie quality. The production and aesthetic qualities of these movies are also often quite similar, with high-budget special effects, action-packed sequences, and dramatic musical scores. These aesthetic choices, such as costume design, color grading, and cinematography, are also often standardized to create a consistent comic book look and feel. While there is variation within superhero movies, and many do introduce unique elements and break from tradition in novel ways, the overall industry trend leans towards a standard formula, one that is cowardly and unoriginal in its over-reliance on profitable tropes. This kind of standardization, according to Adorno and Horkheimer, makes these movies predictable and easy to consume. A better example of standardization might be the Elsagate scandal. Elsagate is a term that emerged around 2017 to describe a controversy involving inappropriate and disturbing low-budget YouTube animations that were supposedly made for children. These videos, released under various nearly identical channels with names like Spider-Man Frozen Marvel Superhero Real Life, often feature popular characters from children's entertainment, such as Elsa from Disney's Frozen, Spider-Man, and Peppa Pig, among others. In these videos, popular children's characters engage in various, often nonsensical, and sometimes disturbing plots, such as Frozen Elsa gets chicken feet, and Evil Santa kidnaps Frozen Elsa and Spider-Man. Adorno and Horkheimer argue that when cultural goods are standardized in such ways, they become interchangeable and lose their individuality. Unchallenged by surprises or originality, the masses become passive and uncritical in their consumption. This can lead to a homogenization of culture, where all media feels, sounds, and looks the same. Importantly, the standardization of cultural goods also serves to reproduce and reinforce existing social structures. By providing a constant stream of interchangeable cultural goods, the culture industry reinforces norms and values, maintaining the status quo and inhibiting social change by leaving no space for alternative or controversial ideas. The commodification of culture is another core concept explored in critical theory. It refers to the process by which cultural forms, practices, and expressions are converted into goods or services that can be sold or traded on the market. With the advent of capitalism and mass production, cultural products such as music, art, literature, and film are produced and sold like any other commodity. This includes everything from mass-produced prints of famous artworks to streaming subscriptions for music and film. The economic demand for profit influences the content of cultural products, leading creators to prioritize mass appeal over originality or artistic integrity. This results in a market of formulaic, standardized content, as creators try to replicate successful formulas instead of taking risks on new ideas. As stated by Adorno and Horkheimer, films and radio no longer need to present themselves as art. The truth that they are nothing but business is used as an ideology to legitimize the economic crash they intentionally produce. They call themselves industries, and the published figures for their directors' incomes quell any doubts about the social necessity of the finished products. In other words, for Adorno, much of modern culture is simply business, representing itself in aesthetic form. Perhaps unsurprisingly, advertising also plays a central role in Adorno's concept of the culture industry and the commodification of culture. Adorno and Horkheimer see advertising as more than just a tool for selling goods. It's also a mechanism that sustains the culture industry, shapes social consciousness, and reinforces capitalist social relations. For example, they argue that advertising often manufactures false needs. It does this by convincing consumers that they require certain products or services for their happiness, social status, or self-identity, even when these commodities are not necessary for human prosperity. Through advertisers' manipulative depictions of normalcy and desirability, the advertising business creates new markets for capitalism by exploiting human insecurity. One example of this might be skin whitener products. According to Adorno, advertisers exploit the population in essentially the same way as political propagandists. In his words, on the charts of advertising research organizations, indistinguishable from those of political propaganda, consumers are divided up as statistical material into red, green, and blue areas according to income. Advertising also serves an ideological function by promoting the values and norms of capitalism. It associates commodities with desirable attributes like happiness, success, and social acceptance, linking consumer behavior with these ideals. Through its influence over public desires and perceptions, advertising psychologically manipulates the masses over the course of their lives into participating in and perpetuating the capitalist system. It fosters passive consumption rather than critical thinking or active participation in cultural life. Of course, as we are coming to learn in this series, all German theorists must address the issue of rationalization in modern life. Adorno and Horkheimer contend that what was once seen as a liberating force, the Enlightenment's emphasis on reason and rationality, has turned into a method of domination. Adorno and Horkheimer argue that the Enlightenment, despite its aim on human emancipation and rationality, has paradoxically resulted in new forms of repression and irrationality. This paradox is the Dialectic of Enlightenment. They argue that Enlightenment thought, which extols reason and science, has led to a form of instrumental rationality that values efficiency and utility above all else. This kind of rationality is used to justify and maintain power structures, and leads to forms of social control, exemplified by the manipulative power of the culture industry. They also argue that the Enlightenment's emphasis on the domination of nature has led not only to the exploitation of the natural world, but also to the domination of human beings themselves, as people come to be viewed merely as objects to be controlled and manipulated into different forms of consumption. For Horkheimer and Adorno, climate change might be considered as a paradoxically irrational outcome of rationalized production, which focuses on efficiency and profit at the expense of the survival of the natural world. The motto of the Age of Enlightenment was "Dare to Know," famously uttered by the 18th century writer and philosopher Immanuel Kant. Adorno and Horkheimer take the culture industry as proof that the ideals of the Enlightenment become contradictory when misapplied. The dominance of instrumental rationality has yielded an unthinking population, oriented towards mass consumption of stale ideas. This deception is the ultimate betrayal of the Enlightenment movement. As stated in the essay, in contrast to the enlightened Kantian, the culture industry no longer has anything in common with freedom. It proclaims, "You shall conform, without instruction as to what. Conform to that which exists anyway as a reflex of its power and omnipresence." The power of the culture industry's ideology is such that conformity has replaced consciousness. To put it crudely, the position taken by the Frankfurt School suggests that the domination and commodification of pop culture and the media by the ruling capitalist class has brainwashed the masses into an uncritical and passive adherence to capitalist ideologies. These masses view reality through the warped prism of the culture industry. In the same way that the capitalist organizes and controls labor during the working hours, the culture industry organizes free time with a set of standardized cultural themes and messages which constrain thought. As stated by Adorno and Horkheimer, the whole world is passed through the filter of the culture industry. For them, the commodification of culture is akin to the commodification of human consciousness. Adorno and Horkheimer call for an original and abnormal culture, the kind of art which displays features of ugliness, indifference, and perspective, bringing the problems of the world and the individual on display, rather than conforming to a basic model. This is where it starts to feel a little elitist and self-obsessed to me. Based on my reading, Adorno and Horkheimer make a fine argument about the dangers of pop culture, as well as its tendency towards standardization under capitalism. But they just sort of imply that popularity is a sign of inferiority. It feels a little bit like the guys at the party who say they only listen to bands that you've never heard of. But that's just my perspective. Anyway, the Frankfurt School theorists saw this mindless consumer culture as incredibly dangerous, as it encourages everybody to accept the same values and behaviors. Adorno and Horkheimer thought that the Nazi Party used many of the same tactics as the culture industry to create a subservient and uncritical population where ideological and cultural homogeny were valued at the expense of millions of lives. Overall, Adorno and Horkheimer's concept of the culture industry has had an undeniable impact on social theory, particularly in the realm of cultural studies and media studies. However, it has not proven to be beyond reproach. Some might counter that the concept of the culture industry overemphasizes the homogeneity and passivity of audiences. It presumes that audiences passively absorb and internalize whatever messages are conveyed to them through the mass media, without taking into account the active role that audiences often play in interpreting and negotiating these messages. In reality, audiences may interpret and react to media content in diverse and sometimes even intelligent ways. Furthermore, the concept of the culture industry, like much of critical theory, has been routinely criticized for its distinct lack of empirical grounding. A common criticism leveraged against the Frankfurt School theorists is that their analyses are based largely on philosophical speculation and abstract theorizing, without sufficient evidentiary support for their causal or relational claims about the potential effects on audiences and consumers. Well, anyway, that's it for today. I hope you learned something, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video.